I just want us to refocus for a minute. Just think about that proclamation. Think about Will, a slave. He couldn't even go to court. I don't even think he could go and sit in that courtroom. But think about this slaveholder who had the respect for a human being and the rights of a human being that he thought he should have the right to defend himself. And like I said, people hadn't paid $1,000 to defend anyone in court. But he paid it to have Will defend. Will has only one name because we were slaves. We didn't have a whole identity. You can't track down Will and where his family was. So once again, we got lost identity, but stories are not lost. And I'm glad and appreciate the Phoenix Historical Society for uncovering this story. And at this time, to talk more about history, uncovering history, the story of Will, our beloved Dr. David Denard, who is the director of the African American Studies at East Carolina University, right down the road from here. We got this rich human being who, when I say rich, I'm thinking in terms of quality and knowledge. I don't know how much money is in his pocket, okay? But he brings us a lot of knowledge, and he's going to bring it to us today. And he is also a member of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Dr. Denard, come on up.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am excited to be here on this Saturday afternoon as we honor and commemorate the deed of a slave known only as Will, an enslaved person. We are all standing on the shoulders of individuals like Will. He probably never knew that we would be making this kind of fuss about him. He was just about the business of doing his work, not bothering anyone, but somehow there was a period when he needed to assert his humanity, his agency. Now, I want to begin at the outset and say congratulations to Jim and all of the members of the Phoenix Historical Society for the excellent work that you are doing. Okay? It is not easy to do this kind of work in 2017. So Jim says that, and I heard earlier that this is the 6th request that you have made to the North Carolina Highway Historical Marker Advisory Committee. And they have approved 6 requests now. And as a member of that group at one point, I was a member of that group at one point, I know it's not automatic that you get your request honored. They require that you do a lot of research to justify why a marker should be erected in the name of an individual or an event. And some persons are not successful the first time in making their request. They go back a second time they're not successful a second time, and they may end up at the North Carolina Historical Commission, where they will appeal their case and say, we want you all to reconsider what this committee didn't do. We had a case like that not long ago. I'm on the North Carolina Historical Commission. So it requires quite a bit of work in preparing a request. And it is great that you all have done that kind of work and you've been successful, and I would say full speed ahead. We often talk about these markers as history on a stick, because it's important to try to compress as much history as possible into a few lines so that you can fit it there. And that's one of the things that the committee is concerned about, you know, how concise and accurate you are in presenting the information that will fit on this sticker. So I want to ask you all a question to consider. I'll come back to it in a minute. But when you look at this marker, this history on a stick, what do you see? I'll come back and get your response to that. But what I want to do is make a comment or so about the evolution of the study of American slavery during the last 40 years as a kind of context for understanding we, the state and we. From the time that African Americans were captured on the coast of Africa and brought to the Americas, scattered across the Americas, they fought for their humanity. They fought for their personhood. They fought for their names. They fought to try to say to the world that we are human beings. We're not slaves. We are folk who were captured, human beings, and enslaved. One historian has said that this Atlantic slave trade that was responsible for scattering folk throughout the Americas had two primary edges, and these edges cut the deepest and touch each to the quick. One edge was the separation of the African from a society and a community that held all meaning for him. And the second one was his conversion into a marketable object. So you are taking the African away from his community, changing his name, giving him a new name. And then you are trying to convert him into a marketable object. He becomes chattel property. So throughout the long period of history, these enslaved Africans made their case in various ways that we are not chattel property, we are human beings. And now we are beginning to see the fruit of some of their labor, where others recognize that they were also human beings, as in this case, the wheel. But that's not what the early historians told us. We have a major historian who published a book in 1918 titled American Negro Slavery, and the author was U.B. Phillips, Burdick B. Phillips. And he set forth in that book some principles or guidelines that other historians would follow, all the way up through the 1960s. And he said that these enslaved Africans were Sambos. And his composite sketch of a Sambo was a person who was docile, happy, contented with his life, and always looking up to his master for guidance. He was like an overgrown child. So that became the thesis, the Sambo thesis that we would use to study slavery from 1918 all the way up to the 1960s. 1954, 56, Kenneth Stanton wrote a book titled The Peculiar Institution, and called into question that Sambo thesis. He looked at much of the evidence that U.B. Phillips had looked at and came away with some different conclusions. He found overall that these enslaved folk represented a troublesome property. They were not always happy with their lives. It was revealed in the runaway ads that were printed in the newspapers. It was revealed in the papers left by slave owners that they set fields afire, they broke tools, they committed individual acts of resistance, collective acts of resistance. But that information was ignored for the most part by folks like U.B. Phillips. And we have a version of slavery that was written from the planner's perspective, the master's perspective, not the enslaved's perspective. And the story of the slave really didn't enter the historiography in a significant way until 1972, when John W. Blassingame published a book titled The Slave Community. And this book, the subtitle was Plantation Life in the Antebellum South. And Blassingame looked at slavery from a three-pronged perspective. From the point of view of the slaveholders, from the point of view of the enslaved, and from the point of view of outside observers, folk who traveled to the South, from the North and from Europe, and made their comments about what they observed. And from that evidence, he was the first scholar to make full use of more than 100 narratives that had been written by enslaved folk, where they told their own story, like Frederick Douglass's narrative. But that information had been virtually ignored. So Blassingame said slaves not only were not docile, but they created a community. And in that community, they developed heroes that were the individuals that they raised up and didn't necessarily accept the heroes that were thrown up by the planters, such as Allen in this story. Allen was the slave foreman. He worked for the master, James Back, and he was under the supervision of Richard Baxter. So he had to carry out the wishes of those individuals. And enslaved folk did not always accept those individuals as their heroes and sheroes. But they turned to folk like conjurers, preachers, midwives, or even individuals such as Will, who represented their interests and their concerns. So, in 72, 73, 74, 1972, 73, 74, we started talking about the slave community. Communities that enslaved folk created with hot, with kitchens low, because that's when we started soul food, you know, the way we prepare food in our kitchens. Not necessarily the same way we prepare food in the big house, you know. So if you look at studies like 1974 by a historian named Eugene Genovese, who wrote the book titled Roll, Jordan, Roll, The World the Slaves Made, he will talk about kitchens high and kitchens low, and how African Americans behave in their own community. And that's what we've been focusing on since the 70s. And looking at slavery from that perspective has made the journey and the study very exciting. Why? Because enslaved folk are viewed there as actors and actresses in their own rights. This is where we come up with this concept known as agency. See? Where it became clear that, based on the evidence left by enslaved folk, they did not always do what they were told to do by the master. They did not always stay on the plantation just because he said, don't run away, don't steal master's hogs, don't steal master's chickens. They developed a mindset of their own. And Blasingame set forth at least 3 personality types that you would find in this community of enslaved folk. One, you probably find some Sambos, those individuals who were determined to go along, to get along, to do whatever the master asked them to do and not create any problems. But on that same community, there were some Jacks. And Jack was the type of enslaved person who would do what he was supposed to do if you didn't push him too hard. If you pushed him too hard, he would push back. The other person on that community would be an individual such as Nat Turner, who would organize a slave revolt or slave conspiracy and try to put to death all of these enslaved folk, slave masters and slave holders who were trying to enslave them. So Blasingame helped us to understand the diversity of the enslaved community, which is what we understand now. All folk, and I know when I play sports and I'm walking around on the yard and school and all of that, you know. There are individuals who are just determined to bully you. You know, you have to stand up to them. Okay? There are others who will do what they are told, and there are others just won't follow the rules for no one. They are their own persons. You can punish them, you can do whatever. They will say, like this elderly slave who went to his master at one point and said, "Master, you can sell me, you can whip me, you can kill me, I ain't caring which, but you can't make me work no more." They just carved out their own position. And masters do that in some cases. So we're going to ask later who was we. The Peace on Agency, to highlight that, I want to read a few poems from a book titled The Gate. When I was in Northwestern in the 1970s, Chicago area, I met this person. I was working with her son, who was on the faculty at Northwestern University. She had prepared this book titled Big Gate and pulled together some of the some verses that highlighted and reflected the mind of African Americans during slavery and after slavery. And I often use this when I am teaching my classes to give students some idea of the mindset of enslaved Africans, because we've learned so much about slavery from the perspective of those who were not slaves themselves, what the owners said about enslaved folks. What do you think the enslaved folks said about the owners? Just like we talk about our bosses at points, we don't tell them to their faces, you know, what we think about them, but we may write some notes like, "Homie," you know. And so at the Big Gate, which is a metaphor for this place, away from the big house, you say some things about these individuals. The first one here is titled "Let It." Sure, slavery time was rough. On our plantation, tough. Old Mrs. was as poor as me, and both of us dipped snuff. She said, "Mrs. ain't all that." Okay? And another one is titled "The Witch." And this is rather descriptive of the master. He said, "Old master has got a pointed nose. He got a pointed chin. Ain't got no lips but just a slit. He looked like homemade sand. The cracks is crisscrossed on his neck, and he bald-headed too. He mad cause he been white so long and still ain't well to do. He don't look like he human. You can't tell front from back. That man, he am so miserable, I believe he wish he black." And another one is titled "House Niggas." Now, the slave driver or foreman would kind of fall into that category as a house Negro. Malcolm X talked about these in the 1960s, and so we still got some house Negroes running around here, some field Negroes and all of that. But the house Negro was the one who wanted to do everything his master wanted done, and wanted to look out for his master. He cared more about his master than he cared about himself. That's what we've been told. So this one says, 2 times they call us from the field and tell us old Moss is dying. 2 times house niggas huddle up and all of them is crying. I sick of looking at that sight and ask them why they cry. They say they tired of waiting. Moss take too long to die. Lord help. Now, there is one child runaway, and the most common act of resistance, running away. Just run away to the woods, hide out for a day, necessarily go north and leave, but every day you left the plantation, you could deprive the master of a day's work. And there were chronic runaways. This one is titled Runaway. I run away from beating and just can't understand why a slave that get beat too can't tell no other man. I sulking in the bushes and climb up in a tree. I know a slave done told Moss exactly where I be. I was hungry and done got weak. Comb home would be a feast. I am ashamed Moss stalking me. I am the one, the beast. He am the one, the beast. And he said he's stalking me, but he am the one that's the beast. And the one here titled Rebel. This is similar to Will. I break the hoe, I break the plot, and here he comes, that help. I say right then unto myself, this a one-man rebellion. I stand foursquare and face old Moss. He called me crazy nigga. I rush him and I take his gun, and then I pull the trigger. My time is coming, I don't care if they hang me from a tree. By being crazy like a fox, I sent Moss ahead of me. Now, this one, you don't have to forgive me for this. We have some food back there, but this one is kind of simple. And folk can do this, and folk who work in restaurants can do this now. She clear her throat and spit in soup and do it 3-4 times. She throws some okra in the pot. That too will make a slime. Old Moss will slop it up like hog and say, Sally, by Jove, it's good. And Sally say, I sure is glad. I done the best I could. Family or freedom. This one is titled Family or Freedom. Now we've learned from the records of left by slaves that they cared a great deal about family matters and would avoid just leaving a plantation without trying to visit relatives, in some cases taking them with them. But we were told in some cases from the Halifax perspective that enslaved folk had no real knowledge or family. So this one goes this way. To get my freedom, I would chance my life, but I ain't running and leaving my wife. I had a chance just yesterday. Could have been gone far away. Old Moss was drunk and the driver man too. Neither was watching as they always do, but I'll stick out this lowly life. I ain't running and leaving my wife. And the last one here is titled Mandate. X-ray. Old Moss is a pot-bellied man. That man can't see defeat. Comes siding up real close to me like he am in the heat. He puff and blow, and then he say, "You wench, I'm going to grind you." I step aside and laugh at him. I know he never find it. Now, that's what you can find in the records left by the enslaved. Sterling Stuckey, the son of this author here, wrote a piece titled "Through the Prism of Folklore." And he said it was through the folklore, through their music, through their songs, through their folktales, that enslaved Africans managed to hold on to their humanity and avoid succumbing to the definition that the master sought to impose on them. When they sang songs, for example, "I got shoes, you got shoes, all God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, I'm going to put on my shoes and walk all over God's heaven." So they were affirming that all God's children got shoes. And they knew how they were being taken advantage of in some cases when they said, "We raise the wheat, He give us the husk." And that's the way the text. So these scholars who changed this paradigm on slavery were able to get inside of the minds of these enslaved. Look at the music they have. These songs that we sing as spirituals were created by these unlettered slaves and passed along by word of mouth. They were not written down until the Civil War. They were kept in this oral folk story history. But that's where they would reveal their mind. And then there are large collections of rabbit tales, where a rabbit projected the world. The enslaved folk projected themselves through the couch of a rabbit. He was the smallest creature in the forest. But somehow he managed to outwit the larger foes, like were bear, were fox, and all of that. So we have been examining these tales to get inside of the mind of these enslaved. Now let's go to we. And I want to learn from you what you see when you observe this history on a stick. And you have a description, you know, to have some details of the case on the program. Okay. What do you see? Who was we? What kind of community did Will come from? What was his occupation? What kind of person was he? Do you know what a cotton screw was? Now Will worked at this cotton screw. That's we'll get at some point later, Jim, we'll have to get a slide of a cotton screw. It's a contraption with a platform where you put cotton in a hole there and press comes down and it puts it in a bale. So that's where Will was working at this cotton screw. Not a cotton gin, but a cotton screw. And it doesn't appear that a wimpy kind of person could do that kind of work. So Will's persona, he's presented as, with a name like Will. You would think he's kind of a man's man, Will. He's taking his made his own home. And the problem developed in this case when the foreman wanted to give Will's home to another enslaved person. Will had ownership of this. You can't do that before I let you give my focus on this. I'll just break it. You know, so he broke the hoe and went down to the cotton screw. And the foreman then told the overseer, Richard Baxter, that this person, Will, did not follow the order that I gave him. And so it appears that Baxter said, then I'm going to have to take it upon myself to go and discipline this individual. So he goes over the objection of his wife, takes his gun, you know, and then tells the foreman and maybe another enslaved person to follow me as I go down to confront Will. Will saw him coming, apparently, and Will came down from the platform. They had a conversation. Didn't go, I guess, the way Will wanted it to go. And Will took off. And that's when the overseer decided to shoot Will. And he shot Will, but didn't totally subdue Will. And Will kept running. And he caught up with him later with these other two slaves, and they wanted to, I guess, subdue Will. And Will pulled his knife, cutting that. Apparently accidentally struck the overseer, and the overseer bled to death. And that's where the case then started. After the overseer died, Will had his day in court, and he was charged with murder, which was the typical verdict that you would think, the Edgecombe court. But for some reason, which we don't really know just yet, Will's owner decided to pay $1,000 to two lawyers to defend him as he appealed that case. Why would this master invest that kind of money in an enslaved person? He could purchase another slave for that amount. We don't know enough about the relationship that Will had with his owner. We do not know enough about the relationship that James Ballard had with the overseer. We do know from all of the evidence on overseers that masters and overseers always had problems. There's tension between the overseers and the owners. Owners are always talking about the difficulty of finding a good overseer, who would protect their property and behave so forth and so on. So it may be that this overseer had overstepped his boundaries. And this was a way for this owner to then assert his agenda. And that's what we need to know, of course, more about the relationship of Will and his owner, and the relationship of the overseer and the owner. But what is most remarkable about this case, as it went to the Supreme Court that had been established in 1880, and William Gaston heard this case. And when he said that this enslaved person is a human being with senses, with organs, with feelings, just like those, that was a radical departure from the ordinary way of thinking about enslavement. Because the case prior to that, State versus Young, had ruled that a master has the right to behave in such a way so that he exacts perfect submission from his enslaved person. And that case was overturned here with Gaston. Now, we've seen information on Gaston, who was a Catholic, New Bern, all of that. Supposedly he had some concern about brutality of slavery, and that it was just too much for these human beings to be treated like individuals that were not human beings. So he took it upon himself then to say that masters should have control over their slaves. Master's power is absolute. But it should not go so far as to prevent the slave from defending himself. It should not go to the point of just destroying the person's life. I'll give you an example here now. You read the narrative of Frederick Douglass. This is most classical. This is classical now. Frederick Douglass talks about a slave that refused to be whipped by the overseer. He ran into the water. The overseer gave him 3 counts to come out of the water and accept his punishment. This enslaved person refused to come out, and on the count of 3, the foreman simply blew his brains out. Nothing was done about that. That's generally what happened. That's the way the law stipulated things should be before the case of the state versus Williams. So this is the first time that state Supreme Court has said these are human beings. Certainly they are degraded by slavery, but they are human beings. And that was precedent set in this case. And from some limited information I've seen on this is that one of the justices in the Dred Scott case, you know, the Dred Scott case, 1857, that's the national case, where Chief Justice Roger B. Taney said that Dred Scott had no right to bring suit in the courts in the first place because the Constitution doesn't recognize a slave or a free life as a citizen. He went on to say that a black person has no rights that a white person is bound to respect. Justice Justice Curtis dissented in that case, and he referred back to Edgecombe and some of his rulings, where he had ruled that case of Freeblock, that Freeblock is a citizen and has the right to citizenship. So what this case says, generally, is that North Carolina was a little different than some of these other slave-holding states in defining personality, person of a enslaved person. Now, you know North Carolina is somewhere between Virginia and South Carolina in terms of its character of slavery. Slavery was never as big here as it was in South Carolina in Virginia, but it was still slavery just the same. Now, we, Mr. Rand, I think you have found something here that you want a little more attention, okay? Because we need to try to situate we into the Edgecombe County community. We learned from some of these records about the overseer, but we don't learn much about we. We learned that the overseer had disconnected himself from the African community, didn't believe in religious practices and all of that. That's what we see from some of the records left. We don't know where we're situated in the Edgecombe County community. There may be some folklore on Will somewhere. You know, Nat Turner. Before Nat Turner emerged in 1831 to carry out his deeds, folk had already had been calling him Prophet Nat. Knew that he was different from the rank and file of enslaved folk. So there should be some memory here of an enslaved person known as Will. If we seek out, you know, these reservoirs of information, that's what we need to know. Will, we know from his wife that Will, after he was, case was overturned, he was sent down to a plantation in Mississippi. Plantation in Mississippi, he killed African-American, slave African-American, and he was hanged for that. His wife came back to this community, and she's reported to have said that Will had a streak of bad luck. He got away here with killing a white man, but down in Mississippi, he was hanged for killing a nigger. So the name of his wife is given to us in some of those Planet Center records. But we don't know whether he had a wife here before he was sent down to Mississippi, or he took the wife or whatever. We don't know anything about his family life from the records I've looked at. And that's why I say it would be important to try to situate Will into the Edgecombe African American community, and not just have his story told in a limited way, in a sterile way for the most part, by folk who didn't understand the enslaved community or didn't even recognize the slave community. Now, this is the last thing I'll say on this. Mr. Wren lured me into talking about this over some objections that I generally had related to visiting slave plantations and talking about the he story, the he this and all of that, without getting information on the enslaved. Okay? Somerset Plantation in Washington County is about the only plantation that I've visited more than once, because there they tell a full story of what happened to the enslaved folk, old Sookie, and all of that, and give the life story. They tell the story of the overseer, they tell the story of the master. But in so many places, you just learn about the master, what went on in the big house. And I'm not really interested in hearing more about that. I want the whole story. You don't have to put these enslaved folk on the veranda, but don't make them invisible, because they were there. Now, in the records that I've looked at, this person had at least, Battle had 5 plantations, pretty large slavehold. But we don't have any markers, to show where those slaves lived. As if when we go to some of these places like Monticello, Jefferson's, all the enslaved folk he had, you'd have to dig in the ground to find a marker to say this was Mulberry Road where enslaved folk lived. They've been rendered invisible, in other words. And so Will, to some extent, despite the importance of this case in making legal history, he's still rendered invisible to some extent when you think about the Edgecombe community of enslaved folk. And that's what we have to work on now that the Phoenix Historical Society has gotten us all worked up about the importance of Will. We want to know who Will was. Because he must have been some kind of man to behave as he did. I mean, he took those shots and his back and still didn't go down. And he fought off, the people who came after him. We don't know whether he had been a troublemaker prior to this, or whether he had just been a jack, go along to get along and all of that. And so it would help us then to know more about that. And Mr. Wren, I'll be willing to come back and share some thoughts on situating Will in this Edgecombe enslaved community. Okay? Thank you.
Gave us a lot of challenges on Will and how visible we had a large supply of slavery in this area. Very invisible. My grandfather, invisible. Slave cemetery, overgrown. You know it's somewhere, but can't find it. At this time, we're going to bring up our friend, Mr. Michael Hill, who's been with us since the very formation of Phoenix Historical Society.
Thank you, Doris. I'll speak briefly, and I'm hungry like you are. I want to talk a little. I'm grateful to be here inside in air conditioning. I have participated in events like this for 33 years, a number of them outside in the summer. And if you could imagine us standing in the corner of that field down there by that sign, I think David would have kept his remarks a little shorter. But I've been to 2. We did one about E.E. Smith, the educator, down in Botanicus in Duplin County. People fainted that day. I want to share some news. In addition to working on these signs, I head research for archive and history. And we have 2 projects just starting up. This will be news to David. David oversees our work through his work on the commission. And it's pertinent to David's reference to agency. Blacks taking charge of their own destiny. One project relates to David Walker. David Walker is from Brunswick County, and he authored a very important book known as David Walker's Appeal, early in the 1800s. are there in Brunswick County. And we're going to do an exhibit about David Walker at our site in Brunswick Town, near where he was on a plantation there. Second name that we're pursuing is Golden Franks. Some of you may remember his name. Golden Franks was from Edenton. We have a historic site in Edenton. It's mostly about colonial history, but we have the prospect, through the goodwill of Franks' daughter, Goldie Franks Wells, of acquiring his house and making it part of the tour, the historic tour in Edenton. Now, everything we do is African American history, of course, and I want to share with you about the Edgecombe marker in this area. We're doing one in Rocky Mount later this year about Kay Kaiser. Old folks here will remember the name Kay Kaiser. He was from Rocky Mount, went to Carolina, and he was a band leader, hosted a radio and television show called the College of Musical Knowledge. But about these signs, just a few notes. These signs are made in Ohio. They're made of aluminum. They melt the ingots and press the letters in clay and form these signs. We have a website where you can find out more. There's an essay in the program that comes from that website. But the website covers all of our 1,600 markers, and I encourage you to look at that, ncmarkers.com. Committee, David served on, approves these markers, and it is, as David said, a tough thing to qualify. The significant, what sets our markers apart from other states are the big letters. The intent is if you pass it on the highway, you at least can read part of it. And there are 3-inch tall letters on these signs. The economy of space is important on these signs. I wrote this one, I've written about 400 of these. This one, we tried best as we could at about 25 words to say what was important about this legal case. So it's our hope this marker preserves the memory of the legal case, State versus Will, and of Will, and their place in Carolina and U.S. history for years and years to come.
Thank you. I think it's good that our technology has even brought us to the point that we know that sign is not going to rust and decay in a short time, and it's going to be there preserved for years.
Probably the greatest thing to it is a traffic turn. I think the way it's situated in the corner of that field, it looks to be safe from that.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'm going to bring up my sister, who's the president of Phoenix Historical Society, for closing remarks. And before she comes up, thank you all for this. Thank you for Marker Society. Just thank you in general. Dr. Denard, thank you, because now we do need to find out more about Will, but also Will gave a voice to thousands of slaves who worked and were born right here in Edgecombe County.
Good afternoon to everybody. I would like to say on behalf of the Phoenix Historical Society, we do appreciate you attending this program. It was one that was dear to my heart, especially Jim. This is one he has talked about for a number of years. I do appreciate Dr. Denard for speaking on this subject and educating us. It's good to look back to know where your people, where your society, where your community used to work and live. If you don't look back, you will continue to do the same things over and over and over again and make the same mistakes. So our philosophy is to promote and discover and uncover your history. So on that note, please try to learn your community. Okay? There's one thing that I'm learning from this lesson is our government was based on the founders of this country and their philosophy and their thoughts on the government. The government system will work. It will work if we view it in the right content. Because we're all humans. And I do think money aside, like you said, Dr. Barr. What's the reason for doing this? That's a significant amount of money for that time period. So let's all remember that we need to work together, because right now in our history, we're at a very divisive, dividing time of life. So let's try to work together. And thank you, Mike Hill. Thank you very much. And for everybody that gave a hand in this program. And most of all, thank you, Dunbar community, for letting us come into your facility. Thank you very much. And when you leave here today, if you have not already seen the marker, please travel, I guess, south, cross 97, go straight, and you will see the sign at the end of this road. We're at juncture to 64 alternate on your left. It's only a bit of mile and a half from here. You got the time. It's just a sunny, bright, warm day. Roll your windows down, turn on your AC, and just take a mile and a half out of the way and see this wonderful marker in person. Thank you very much.
It's going to benefit me because I always had trouble remembering exactly what road took me to Dunbar Community Center. Now I have found out to keep it, make the right turn. We're getting ready to close out our program. I want to tell you just a little bit more about Dunbar Community Center, because I don't want you to leave here without the history of this building. Dunbar Community Center started out as this is a donated building from Willoughby Funeral Home. It used to be their funeral home, but they donated it to Dunbar Community Center, and that is what you're standing. This is where we are. This is the land. This is here, but it used to be the Willoughby Funeral Home. And then when Senator Bob Martin was a senator on the Appropriations Committee, he gave a donation along with the Hilltop Family Foundation, which made it possible to build the multi-purpose room onto it where the seniors come to have their breakfast and lunch and everything now. So history continues to evolve, and all of you can one day be a part. You never know what you're going to do to help contribute to the history of Edgecombe County. Just like, and what was your part in it? Battle paid $1,000 and changed the law of this land. You can do it too. Now we will close out with a benediction and praise, and it will be done by the Deacon Reverend Armstrong.
God didn't have a right for your name. And Father, we ask that you will bless this food that we're about to receive. Now, so let it be nourishment for our hearts. We ask these blessings in our